Hello, welcome to this upcycle project where I'm going to show you how I transformed an empty bottle into a nice decorative item. First of all, I'm cleaning the bottle of the labels. Thankfully they pulled off really easily this time. I did have a little bit of sticky residue though that I removed with some acetone and scraping. And I also made sure to file down any sharp edges on the cap. I am using some aluminum tape over some cardboard. I am trying to achieve a wrinkly texture, so first I'm just working that aluminium tape and then sticking it down all scrunched up and then smoothing it out to some degree, but the wrinkles are going to stay nice and dimensional. And I covered the whole piece of cardboard that I have there, and I'm going to cut it up in strips of different widths so that I have a variation. And then I'm just going to use my scissors to cut them up in smaller pieces, just not really measuring anything, just making sure that I have a variation in sizes. I have this image from a pattern paper that I've had in my stash for a very long time. It kind of looks like some sort of art sketch. I don't know who it represents, maybe nobody, but it's just an interesting image that I wanted to use, and I've just glued it down to my bottle. And I'm using a bone folder to just curl those pieces of cardboard with the aluminium tape on it, so that they fit better around the shape of the bottle. Just makes it a bit easier to work with. And I'm using some hot glue to attach these pieces in kind of a random fashion. I do want to go around the image and fill most of the surface of the bottle with these strips, but I want gaps and interesting shapes as well. So I'm just taking my time, making decisions as I go along about what goes where, and just covering almost the whole surface of the bottle, using up every last piece of cardboard strip I have prepared. And now I'm going through my stash of bits and bobs, and I'm looking for things to use in the project. And I've pulled out a lot of little flower plastic bits and different textured things, and I'm just going to be using hot glue to attach everything. This process was a little bit lengthy, but it was fun, just making decisions about what goes where and forming little clusters here and there. At this stage, everything is like its original plastic color, and the whole thing is like a visual cacophony, but it's going to get painted over and it's going to look a lot better. I'm just taking my pokey tool and making some rivet holes in some of those metallic strips. On the cap, I decided to use this larger flower that actually came off of a hairband I once had. And I made a texture paste from tile grout, glue, and water. And I'm going to fill in a lot of the holes and empty spaces on the whole bottle. This has the double effect of creating that texture and filling in the holes, and absolutely securing everything down, embedding pieces to some degree. And that's what it looks like when I'm finished with the tile grout. After leaving it to dry overnight, I'm just going to first use dark brown paint to paint over everything and finally do away with the ugliness of the multicolored, shiny, pinky stuff, and unifying everything with one color. And this also works as a primer, which makes it easier for me to paint the proper colors later on. As an undertone, I'm going to use red, green, and yellow to just dab on colors here and there in splotches. This is not the final paint job. I just want to have those undertones present so that there is a color variation that comes through when the piece is done. And of course, I treat the cap the same way as I did everything else. I'm also using a different color to highlight most of the edges and bring out a lot of that dimension and to lighten the piece a lot. As you can see, this makes a really big difference, and it's just very satisfying to see all of those elements come out and show up in relief. I'm using this mild light green, over brushing lightly over everything. I want to add a bit more texture, and there were still gaps that I wasn't happy with. So I'm going to use some straight PVA glue and some fine granite to add in kind of a random fashion to the whole piece. I could be using micro beads or I don't know, something similar to that, but this is what I had on hand, and in the end it did have the desired effect, and I'm quite happy with the results. After the whole piece has dried, I'm going to be using some shellac ink to seal it in. First, I'm using it just out of the bottle. It has this yellow tint to go over the portrait, and then I'm adding some brown paint to go all over everything else. I just used a few drops of acrylic paint. But as I'm using it, I'm realizing that I don't like the color. It's too yellowy. So I added a few drops of a different, more reddish brown, and that looks a lot better. So I'm using it as a sealant and as a wash at the same time. It seals in that granite permanently, and it also seeps into all those cracks and like makes things look a lot more dimensional. I left it to dry overnight once again, and this is after many hours of drying. So At this stage, I decided to use a kind of like an off-white color to go over those raised elements once again. I'm just being very careful and using my finger to just feel out the raised things so that I don't go too heavy-handed with the brush. And I like this process. Once again, it brings out those dimensional elements to another level of visual interest. And to finish everything off, I'm actually going to use gold paint. It doesn't have a lot of pigment, but it has a lot of shiny particles, and I'm going all over the bottle, not rubbing it in too hard into the recessed areas, but basically covering the entirety of the whole piece. And with the help of the white that was rubbed over the raised edges, it just really brings things to life and makes them super dimensional. This was a simple little project, but it was fun to make, and it's just a good idea of what to do with those extra bottles that you may have lying around your house that you keep forgetting to take to the recycling center. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I've attached some close-up shots of the final piece. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you have a nice day. Do let me know about your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear some feedback. Thank you. Bye.